Next, let's set up the player's paddle. Let's add a new scene here. We're going to do other node, and we're going to make this a character body 2D because we want to control this either through scripts or through inputs. So for the character, for the player, we're going to want to control this with our keyboard and joystick. Let's add a sprite 2D under that. And we can go to the 2D scene here and zoom in, hit F to center. And with the sprite 2D selected, let's go ahead and drag and drop our paddles PNG on there. And then we can add a collision shape 2D and make that a rectangle shape. Let's go ahead and turn snapping on, 2x2 snapping, and just make this fit just like that. I like the collision shape to be right below the body that it's associated with, so let's move that up there. And now with the player character body 2D selected, let's set up its collision layer and collision mask. So let's add another layer name here and name this paddle. So we're going to be on the paddle layer, and we're going to turn off the world layer. We're not on the world, but we want our paddle to collide with the world. So paddle is now going to collide with our arena colliders on the top and bottom here. Let's go ahead and save that under a player folder. There we go. And let's add that into our game. So let's instantiate a new child scene, player. There we go. Now let's position the player at 360 divided by 2 here. So it's right in the center on the Y position. And on the X position, I believe this is 12 pixels wide. So if we move it over by 6, it should be right on the edge. And it's not. Maybe it's 10 wide. So there we go. No, maybe it's 8 wide. So it's 8 wide. So if we position that 4 over, it's going to be right on the edge. But let's actually push it out a little bit. So let's push it out by 8 pixels. So let's put it at 12. Okay, that looks good. Next, let's get the player's paddle moving. So to do that, we're going to use a component. We're going to make a velocity component. So we can reuse this velocity component with our paddle and our opponent's paddle when we create it. And that's just going to control its movements and its velocity. So let's add a new scene here. Let's do other node, and we're just going to make this a generic node. It doesn't need to be a node 2D because it's not going to be positioned in the scene in any way. So let's name this velocity component. And let's go ahead and save that. Let's make a new folder here, name components. And save that here. And now we can add a script to it by clicking this script icon up here, create script. So now we have our velocity component script. And let me zoom in a little bit here so it's a little bit larger for you guys to see. We're going to create a couple export variables up here at the top. Let's do max speed as a float, and we'll set that to 150. And let's do export var acceleration as a float, and let's set that to 5. Create another variable here, and let's name it velocity. This is going to be a vector 2. And let's set it initially to vector 2, 0. So vector 2.0 is the same as saying vector 2.0.0. It's just a little shorthand for that. All right, let's go ahead and create a couple functions in here. So the first function we're going to have is move. It's going to take in a character body, 2D, and it's going to move that character body 2D. So let's set the character body 2D's internal velocity to our script's velocity here. And let's set the character body 2D to move and slide. And then if there's any leftover velocity, let's capture that. So let's grab this character body velocity and capture that on the back end. Create another function here named accelerate in direction. And it's going to take in a direction of vector 2. And let's create another variable here. Final velocity going to be equal to direction times our max speed. And so let's set velocity equal to velocity, and we're going to lerp this to our final velocity with a weight of 1 minus the exponent of negative acceleration times get process delta time. So really quick, what this code is doing here specifically, this is we are taking our velocity and we are linearly interpolating it to our final velocity. So that's going to use a weight, and every frame it's going to slowly increase towards this final velocity. And this code here is simply a frame rate independent interpolation factor. Basically what that means is it simulates an easing towards the target velocity that decays over time. So this basically converts our acceleration rate into a frame rate independent interpolation factor for smooth movements towards our final velocity. And we're using delta to make this frame rate independent. If we didn't times this by delta here, we would lerp towards our final velocity faster or slower depending on how fast or slow the FPS is on any given computer. So this makes it work at the same rate no matter how fast or slow your computer actually is. And then finally here, let's have another function. We're going to call this decelerate. And that's just going to accelerate in a direction to vector 2.0. So this will just slow us down from whatever our velocity is to 0. All right. Just a quick note about styles of GDScript style. They recommend that you use 2 spaces in between functions. And they also recommend that you put all functions that you're going to call outside of this script. So like we're going to call move, accelerate in direction, and decelerate outside of this script. But if we were only having an internal function, we would put an underscore in front of it. So decelerate would look like this if we were only going to use decelerate in this script itself. We want to do this to show, just to tell ourselves, you know, this function shouldn't be called outside of the script. One more thing about variables. The order for listing your variables at the top of the script, you would do signals first, then enums, and then constants. Then you would do your export vars, then your vars, and then finally your onReady vars at the bottom. So if you just stick to this all your scripts will look consistent, and they'll all be nice and conforming to GDScript styles and standards. GDScript also recommends putting a space up here. I don't like the way it looks, so I don't put a space there, but I put double spaces everywhere else. All right, anyways, take a look here at our notes. Player movement. Okay. Let's go back to our player, and we're going to add a script on here. Add that script. And let's add a constant up here for our start position. I'm actually not going to use this right at the moment, but let's just save our start position wherever we set it up in the game. So that's 12 by 180. Let's set that up. We can use it later. So that's our player paddle set up right in the center of the screen. Let's go ahead and click on our player again, and then add that velocity component on there. And any components I like to have right at the top. So we have our velocity component. You can see our export variables here, so we can actually change these values without having to go into our velocity component script and change them. And we can also change them independently on whatever scene that we have the velocity component attached to. So when we make our opponent paddle, we might want him to have a slower max speed than this. So if we just used a const here for max speed, every velocity component would have the same max speed. If we use an export variable, we can actually change that per scene that we attach it to. So it makes export variables very powerful and very good for iterating and game design. So let's go ahead and get our player moving. So to do that, let's go into the process function. This is a built-in Godot function that runs every frame. And let's use our velocity component. So let's hold control. Let's grab this, hold control, and then drop it here, and that'll make an onReady var for us. Instead of us having to type this out, you can just drag it over, hold control, and drop it in. And you can do that with any node in the scene tree. You can just make onReady vars really quickly. So now we have an onReady var. So we could, if we wanted to, we could just say $sign velocity component and access it like that. But if we're going to be using it every frame, we might want to, we're just going to store a reference to it, and that might save us a little bit of overhead. So let's do movement vector. This is going to be a vector 2D, or sorry, a vector 2. And we are going to make a function here called get movement vector. Go ahead and make that function. So function get movement vector. And this is going to return a vector 2. So because we're only going to be using this function within the script itself, that's why I put the underscore in front of it. Let's do var y movement. It's going to be equal to input dot get action strength. And we're going to need to set a few more project settings here. So let's go back to our input map. And under this, let's do move down and add that. And let's do move up and add that. And then let's set a couple events here. So if we do D, let's move down. And if we do W, let's move up. We can also set multiple actions here. So if we want to move down with the arrow keys, let's hit arrow key down and arrow key up. And then finally, you know what, that's good for now. Now we can call move down here. And we're going to minus the get action strength of move up here. What this is going to do is if we're holding D and W at the same time, we're not going to move at all. It's not going to be fighting with each other to decide who gets the input. If we hit move down, this is going to give us 1. So that's going to move us down on the y-axis. And if we hit up, it's going to be -1. So this movement will either be a 1 or a -1, depending on if we hit move up or move down. And we're just going to return that as a vector2 with 0 on the x-axis and y movement on the y-axis. So this is going to give us either a vector2 of 0, 0, 0, 1, or 0, -1. So now we know if we want to move up or down. Let's do var direction as a vector2. It's going to be equal to movement vector dot normalized. Okay, we might not need to normalize this since this is always going to be between 0 and 1 anyways, but just to be safe, let's normalize that. We can actually mess around with that and see if we need to normalize it or not. I don't think we do, but it's fine. Velocity component. Let's go into our velocity component and let's accelerate in direction to our direction. And let's do velocity component dot move self. All right. And we're not going to be using delta here, so let's put an underscore in front of that just to get rid of that warning. Okay, well, with that all set up, we should be able to move our paddle in our scene. So let's go down and up, and we're colliding with the bottom wall because we have that mask set up. We're colliding with the top wall, we have that mask set up, and we're moving. That looks pretty good.